Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me once again, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is today we are going to be talking Cameron's updated Dragon Age The Veilguard thoughts as he's continued playing through that game this past week. And then I, while he's been playing that, sat down and replayed through Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, finished that, had a fun time with that, and then also went straight into and have already finished the Lego Horizon Adventures game that just came out. So give some Horizon thoughts as my part of the contributions. We are going to talk light spoilers probably for Dragon Age. Cameron hasn't finished the game yet, but he's like nearing kind of the end game. I would say you're into the third act, it sounds like, based on what we were talking about before we started recording. Haven't gotten through like all of the characters, sub stories and stuff, but a couple of the big like major game, decision kind of moments have happened, and so yeah, you're kind of in the back half at least, if not the back third of the game. So cool. So yeah, check out timestamps for that. But yeah, be light spoilers, might discuss some of the characters and some maybe some light choice kind of illusions or something like that. But we'll try and keep it largely spoiler free until Cameron's finished the game. So yeah, check out the timestamps for those below. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast everywhere you can, all that fun stuff. So Cam, updated Dragon Age The Veilguard thoughts. You said something before we started recording of I had recommended that you check out this game for the lore, if nothing else. You'd very much kind of been turned off by a lot of the pre-release marketing stuff, but after playing through it and knowing what a lore hound you are, I was like, all right, I think you're at least going to like that. Even if combat doesn't do much for you, or even if the characters don't do much for you or whatever, the lore you will absolutely sink your teeth into. And you were like, you have no idea how bad it's got me. So yeah, tell me what about the lore has really sunk its teeth into you? Because I'm not hugely the lore guy. Even going back and like replaying Dragon Age Inquisition earlier this year, I'm sure you are still like way deeper into the lore and the history, especially because so much of it got set up in Origins, and it's been a good 10 plus years since I've played Origins probably. So so a lot of that is like, I remember top level kind of big tier stuff, but yeah, digging into like, oh, here's what this really means for all this stuff. Just, we probably don't need to go super down the rabbit hole, as you can sometimes do. In that. But how you mentioned that like you felt like they were looking at the kind of like the lore Bible of the series and said like, what can we dig into? What can we play with more? Dive into your updated thoughts on that.
Sure. I will say, like, if there's one thing that I admired about David Gator as a game director, it's the way that he helped craft a world with mystery in it, like a lot of like realistic uncertainty to the lore of the world. Mm-hmm. There's always been like, well, how literal is the Chantry's version? How literal is the Elven God? Like, was the Elven Gods first and then the Chantry, and then like the Maker and the Chantry? Or are they separate? Like, but they all have some sort of connection to the Fade. Like all the kind of like quote unquote legitimacy of religious inquiry had like right out, like that's always been a fascinating aspect of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I saw it because like you reshared or something, but I remember I saw some sort of social post in the last week or two that was basically like somebody looking back on like the history of the Dragon Age games and thinking like, man, all this Andraste stuff seems like propaganda from the church. And then they play through Dragon Age, the Veilguard here, and they're like, "Yup, it was all propaganda from the church."
Yep.
The whole things up north here are very different, and the view of Andraste is wildly different up here.
Well, it's interesting because technically speaking, Andraste Chantry like beliefs do exist in Tevinter, but they have a very different look at it. There is And they bring up a point that's interesting is like, and this is a very interesting and serious point of the lore of Dragon Age is the Chantry split between the Orlesian mother of the Chantry, who is the head of the Chantry, and the Tevinter one. The schism happened between North and South when the Orlesian one said, hey, under no circumstances should mages be allowed to rule. And like that is the interpretation of the Andrastan scripture. Granted, and also as a big note here, a lot of the marches, like crusades, were launched by the Orlesian one, like say like the extermination of elves and all that stuff, largely done by the Orlesian one. So it's not like the Orlesian Chantry are the good guys. They've done a lot of really nasty, awful stuff. Yeah. They're the ones that get their Templars addicted to lyrium.
Yeah, it's just another one of those, like, the people that look at these games and don't see, like, real-world politics in them are just fucking morons who just don't understand history or failed history time and time again. Or have forgotten everything from history that they learned in high school.
The massive major plot through point of Dragon Age Origins is you're going on a political quest to convince the different factions of Ferelden to abide by the ancient treaties that like their ancestors signed and to ask them to uphold them. That is literally politics right there. It's right there. There is a coup that takes place because a High Lord basically betrays the king by
withdrawing his troops.
Fuck
Loghain.
Loghain, like it's
that
all,
I remember.
That's all politics. That's all Dragon Age has ever been is politics. It's established in the lore that being gay is seen as, oh, I guess you don't want kids. That's odd. That's the extent of like homophobia within the Dragon Age world. And I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned on air, like recorded last time, but like the idea that Tosh as a non-binary character, the intricacies that brings to a Qunari is what makes that interesting.
Yeah.
Because the Qunari are binary. And your gender is based on your job. It's not based on your sex. It's based on your job. And so...
Yeah, you mentioned that last week. I'm curious how your take on that particular story has carried over. Because as you were talking through that last week, I was like, I mean, maybe they've been delving into more of this in the codex that I haven't really been digging into and reading. But at least in like the surface level stuff, they didn't really get into that in terms of like what it means to be a male or a female Qunari.
And the big part of that reason is because
part of it is they're specifically not Qunari. They moved to Ravain.
But they're also the Ontom rebellion, basically. The Ontom breaking away from the Qun changes it. The Qunari you encounter, a lot of the Qunari you encounter are quote unquote technically not Qunari. They are Ontom. Once again, Qunari society is judged by your jobs. The Ontom was the military. The Ontom betrayed their I'm trying to remember the name of basically the military leader. The Qunari people are led by three leaders: the body, the mind, and the soul. And the body, which is represented by the military, is I'm trying to remember. It's not Akatosh. It's something else. But he's no longer. It's basically Sten from Dragon Age Origins achieves this role. By the way, as a heads up, Qunari with horns was always going to be the intention, but at the time limitations on their engine, they couldn't do it.
For the very first game.
Yeah, for the first game.
So that's why Sten in canon is a anomaly by not having.
Not just an anomaly, he's considered blessed. Qunari who are like pureborn Qunari, who are born without horns, are considered like a blessing and are meant to achieve something special in their life with whatever role they take on. It should also be noted, Sten was with a whole group of hornless Qunari in Ferelden. So they literally sent like Ferelden, something's going on in Ferelden. We're sending like 5 or 6 of our most potential dudes down there to go check this out. So yeah, if you're part of the Ontom, depending on what rank you have Sten, which is like your soldier. You have like the different ranks of it, but that's your name, that's your identity, that's your gender. And so being moved to Ravain means Tosh has grown up without that kind of like forced stuff going on. So that's another interesting part of it. The Antom Rebellion also brings up a very difficult thing happening, which is and a question raised at this point now has to be raised is like, so basically, quote unquote, all the men broke away from the society and all that's left are the women. Which is and I'm using that as like the gender terms that we understand and interpret. Because right now there's no Antom, which means there's no men in the Qunari anymore. Or at least if there are, they are not like, and that's another thing too. She introduces you to a navigator who is particularly not a Antom. He is not a man. He is not a soldier. He is a navigator. He is a tradesman, which means he has a very different role in the Qunari. This is where things get really, really cool about the Qunari as a people. And the fact and why I freaked out last week when I'm like, there was a rebellion. I can't, like, this is insane. I was not keeping with Dragon Age lore through books and stuff to know that the Trespasser DLC with the Antom trying to blow up all of the leadership of every other country in South Ferelden, or South Thedas, was actually an act that was not approved by the leadership of the Qunari. It was, and this is another thing too, sorry, I'm getting way too deep into the lore. The way leadership also has been shaken because the person leading the Antom in their rebellion was a member of the mind caste of the Qunari. And it's like, stuff really has like gotten out of hand, and like Sten now lost his position because the Antom turned against him. And so now he's now trying to like, they're trying to rebuild and figure out what's going on in Parvalon, and that's cool. Doesn't affect anything going on with Tosh because she's actually like Ravane. She's Ravani. And
there.
Oh, sorry, there. I said she. My apologies. I am working on it. Mm-hmm. It is something I am working on. I apologize.
Have you gotten the Pull the Barv scene yet?
Pull the what?
I'm shorthanding it to the Pull the Barv scene. It's probably not if it hasn't come up in conversation or anything like that.
Not yet, no.
It's basically it made the rounds on social media a little while ago too, as like one of those like, hey, we're gonna pull this thing out of context for our culture war bullshit. But it's basically a scene where some characters, including Tosh, are having a conversation, and one of the characters refers to Tosh as a she instead of a they, and somebody else kind of calls him on it, and the character's like, oh, you're right, my bad. And then
that has not happened yet.
I'm gonna go do push-ups to as my penance to try and like get it in my head to say the right thing to
there you go. That has not happened yet.
And they refer to that as pulling a barv based on a character that's kind of discussed in that scene. So anyway, I'm sure you'll get it in the
at some point, yeah.
Yeah.
But just had the sat down, made a Ravani food for their mom. Mm-hmm. The mom's like, what about some vegetables? And does that, comes back and says, and like right away, like, I'm non-binary. What does that mean? I'm not a man or a woman. Oh, well, in the Qunari, then the mom uses the term for somebody who's basically trans. Like, straight up says, like, the Qunari term for trans. And Tosh goes, no, I'm not man or woman. I don't fit into that. And the mom just goes, I'm going to leave now. I have no idea what's going on. And right before that, you, Tosh's mom straight up says, like, I was not supposed to be a mom. My job was not to be a mom. And I'm like, first off, I love that they're bringing this up here because the Qunari, that is the thing. When you are born, you are taken from your parents and you are put into essentially your age group, the new class of babies being born, and you're raised by a quote unquote professional parent. That is legitimately how they work. They work air nomad style, basically. You're born, you're taken from your family, and like, because your family's technically not a family. Your family are two people married, but they like, that's it for it. You don't have, quote, those people technically, quote unquote, don't have children under the Qun. The Qun are raised by society. Or the children are raised by society under the Qunari by professional educators, caregivers, they got this down pat. That is their communal society. And so it's very interesting that Tosh's mom took Tosh after Tosh was born and found out that Tosh was a fire breather and made the decision that not for my child. And it's like, you can't blame Tosh for being like breaking away from Kunari when you literally did the least Kunari thing by deciding to be a mom. Like, that's why Tosh's story is so fascinating to me. Lore-wise, character-wise, implication-wise, what happens when you, and it's why it's such a cool idea, and why it's not a freaking DEI idea, it's lore-based, and it's so cool, is because what happens when you throw a non-binary person into the Kunari. And it's like, that's what Tosh is. And it's such a cool thing. Also, Tosh might be a little bit on the spectrum.
I love the conversations with Tosh, and like my initial notes on them were they are so Rosa Diaz coded from
Yes.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, 100%.
And like in performance, I think I think they are very specifically being like incredibly direct, incredibly literal. It's almost Draxian a little bit, but
Yes.
But like also the like, you know, they're the tough guy, even though they don't ascribe to guy girl kind of. But they're that, you know, they're the tough, they're the heavy, and so they're very direct in their approach to conversations, all that stuff. So yeah, I really
which is
enjoyed
super
the
Kunari.
writing around them.
Yeah, like if you remember Sten at all, Sten was the exact same way. Like you have a conversation with Sten, and I mentioned it last week. You have a conversation with Sten where if you're a woman, a female warden, he outright says like, you can't be a woman. No, you just can't be. And it's not misogynistic, it's cultural. It is 100%. Like when people are like, well, it's not misogyny, it's my culture. It's like, no, that's misogyny, my guy. Culture is where it's Sten, where it's like, there's no problem with you being female, but you cannot be a woman. Like, that's why Kunari are so fascinating. David Gator and his team, shout out to Jennifer Halper and everyone else who was part of that original Origins team for really creating a really diverse and unique fantasy world within Thetis that continues to like be like, okay, this is really cool. So I've been loving that. Tosh is one of my favorite, like, and also to say this, I like this group of characters more than I like characters in Inquisition.
Sure.
I rank this group of characters above Inquisition, on par, I think, with 2. Origins is such a ragtag group of people who shouldn't be succeeding, who end up succeeding by the skin of their teeth at every level. You have the last 2 wardens in Ferelden, an assassin who is failed at assassinating and is now kind of like, if you don't kill me, the crows will kill me, so I gotta be running with you guys now. Morrigan, who's literally was thrown in there by her mom at the last minute. Liliana, who is a crazy person who thinks that the Maker spoke to her and that you are the hero Ferelden needs and she's gonna follow you because of it. And then you have Sten, who is a murderer, murdered an entire family, parents and children, who saved his life, and it's like, I feel bad about it, but also at the same time, where's my sword? You got Wynn, who is like technically an abomination because she's possessed by a spirit of healing. And then you get Shale, who is, if you do the DLC, which I always do, Shale's such a great character. Shale, who is a golem of a dwarven woman trapped in a golem body, who hates birds, which like, I love it. Shale's super anti-pigeon.
We got Olgrin too, right? Or
Olgrin,
yeah.
The worst, like, quote unquote, worst dwarf you could ever ask for.
Yeah.
The like worst aspects of dwarven culture slammed into a person, debaucherous, idiotic, and just like what a guy. Like literally like you, what is it? What's the way to put it? Like they always say, like you can't do comedy on college campuses anymore. Like Ogren is 100% like you can't do like characters like this. You can still do them. No, not a problem. That's not what I was actually saying. You can't do them. But like, this is the kind of character that people would be like, well, you can't make a character like that anymore. He's sexist. He's racist. He's that. And it's like, no, that's the entire point of his character, is that he is a blowhard idiot who grows. That's why he's included in Awakening going forward. Well, another thing too, like, yeah, you have all these really cool characters that you get in like Awakening and everything. I love, like, that's still, Origins and Awakening are still like my top tier party that you could ever ask for in an RPG. That's the one I base everything off of. I would say Veilguard and 2 are at equal levels for very different reasons. 2 is literally like we're a friend group, but only because we're all friends with Hawk. And even then, some of us aren't even that good of friends with Hawk. Some of us are like, love Hawk.
Yeah, for me, I think all these games have some real standouts and some real ones that just don't connect with me at all. Because like having just replayed Inquisition, yeah, I still hated Cole. Like I still wanted nothing to do with Cole, and I'm sure like lore-wise, he's a very fascinating character, but
not really.
I'm like, I don't want any of this stuff. But like, I really like Blackwall's story, especially. Like Varric obviously is such a fun standout.
Well, Varric's the through line. Everybody loves Varric.
Yeah. And then Iron Bull was a lot of fun. And especially on this last playthrough, I kept like Cassandra around a lot, and I really enjoyed.
I love
like,
Cassandra. Cassandra's great.
Her wrestling with like the Inquisition and what this all means, and like your character and the relationship. And then like, yeah, I didn't like Solus the first playthrough, so let alone like beating the game and finding out like the true nature of Solus. But like that's like that also played into like he's your Anders character from the previous game, or like that through line of like one of your characters is going to just betray you. Usually a mage.
Usually a mage.
But yeah, like
or in my case, I got betrayed twice because I also got betrayed by Iron Bull in my playthrough.
Sure, yeah.
In the Trespasser DLC, he was in my party and he turns on me. I was one person down for the rest of that DLC. It sucked.
You done fucked up. Going back to Origins, especially like Morrigan's certainly a standout for me.
She's the best. She's bae.
Like,
I love her.
Leliana, I really enjoy her brand of weird. And then like Alistair, I remember in like name, but don't like he's very much like a milquetoast Grey Warden in my mind, in my recollection of it from having not played it in a while.
I would say he was the snarkiest of characters.
Sure, yeah.
Like if you had a character who had snark, it was going to be Anders.
He was your Carthonasi character kind of thing.
Basically, Carthonasi, Caden from Mass Effect. Like he's your more generic white guy or like generic sidekick character.
Yeah,
I loved Anders because there was between him and Morgan had a rivalry of like who could be the sassiest bitch. And that's what I loved.
Anders or Alistair?
Alistair, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Alistair, yeah. Alistair and Morgan,
yeah.
When they were together. You
just said Anders.
Oh, did I say Anders? My apologies. Alistair and Morgan, when they are together, are like your two favorite siblings who can't stand each other, but will die for each other.
That's so like circling back to this game, I really like that even the characters that I didn't really like vibe too much with, I loved the inter-party banter that you would get when you're out on a mission and characters are just chatting with one another and stuff. And so much of that, I loved Tosh's interactions with people.
Yes.
Because Tosh was inquisitive, but also very literal and taking things very directly. And like, well, here's everything I think I know about you based on what my mom told me. What's true? Tell me what's true. Like, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this?
Yeah.
All those things. Lucanus, I think, is the pairing in particular that I'm thinking about as I'm talking through this. And Lucanus just kind of being like, why do you think all of these things are true? And them being like, well, that's because that's what my mom told me. And it was
homeschool kid.
It's homeschool kid. It's you, like, they had made the Antivan Crows the boogeymen and said like all the thing, like it's the Antivan Crows want you to eat your vegetables, not me. If you don't eat your vegetables, the Antivan Crows are going to assassinate you. It was that kind of like vibe that is exposed in that scene in those dialogue things. And I was like, oh, I love that so much. I love the vibes of the interactions that you get among so many of these characters was so delightful.
My favorite one right now has been Emmerich. There's even like a scene for it where they do it, and it's like, okay, we got to talk around this. Is like, Tosh, why are you having such a problem with Emmerich? Mm-hmm. And Tosh is like, because these people used to be alive, and he's puppeting their corpses.
Yeah,
and these were people. And like Emmerich and my rook like shared a look of like, oh, we both got like, I've gotten extremely used to your brand of necromancy and bullshit. Tosh has not, and Tosh is not gonna. And it got to a point where it's like, oh, and Emmerich's like, everybody else didn't like acclimated really quickly to Emmerich because of his disposition and everything. It's very clear everybody got used to it. Tosh is not.
Yeah.
And that's for real. That's a real thing. And also it turns out Tosh has been using some particular language about Emmerich, calling him some particular names that have to do with like his activities with corpses that he's not been too happy about. And so you break it down and get them to apologize to each other. And then being like, you guys can talk about other things than corpses. And then Emmerich's like, but not dragons.
Yeah.
And Tosh is like, but who doesn't want to talk about dragons? Emmerich's like, me. I don't want to talk about dragons.
Yeah.
And then Rook was like, well, Emmerich's really into botany. And you're really into, like, there's other stuff you guys can talk about. Ravani culture. Talk to him about Ravani culture. And he goes, oh, I have so many questions about Ravani culture. And the Lords of Fortune. He's like, I've always wanted to ask somebody about the Lords of Fortune. And it's like, cool. We cleared up that there are some conversations that are not cool between people, and we're establishing those boundaries.
Yeah.
When there's two people who like that entire moment of like, I'm not joking. The game was like, there's silence bouncing between Rook and Emmerich looking at each other, like the realization of like, oh yeah, it's weird that you do this.
Yeah.
And like, my Rook is like, I'd kind of forgotten. I'd kind of gotten used to it. I ran around the necropolis. I kind of got used to it. But it makes sense that Tosh wouldn't. And so I'm like, that happened. And that was a really cool scene. I really appreciate it. It's very different than the kind of, because people brought up these scenes and like some reviews and stuff. I was like, okay, cool. And I thought it was going to be like Davrin and Lucanus stuff the entire time. I was like, that was okay, whatever. Like their resolution on that was like, okay, whatever for me. But the Emmerich and Tosh one was like, I'm like, oh, this is cool. Because this is interpersonal dynamics, intercultural dynamics, like a lot of things. Tosh knows Emmerich comes from a culture where corpses are respected and treated differently. And they get that, but at the same time, they find it creepy and weird. And that's justifiable.
Yeah.
And Emmerich's like, that's fair. And I get that. I'm like, I understand. Emmerich introduced me to his parents. Not going to spoil that, but like that happened.
Yep.
Like a lot of really cool stuff going on with the characters. I think the fact like everybody's from one of the factions that you can choose from, meaning you have kind of like a grounded approach to just about everybody. I mentioned last week, I have not been interested in Nev as a romance option because we're coworkers. And it really comes across that way with your Shadow Dragon option interactions, with it being like, we worked in different departments, but we work for the same group. And and for me, there's a sense of like professionalism. My critique about dialogue opportunities and choices and the wheel and stuff remain the same on it. I'm frustrated sometimes by the fact that there is like no consistent tone to the icons that you're choosing. And a lot of the times it feels like you are expounding upon stuff that was not presented to me. And I don't care for that dialogue choice. Also, you have the funny sarcastic mask, and then sometimes nothing funny or sarcastic was said. It was just a different kind of question being asked than one of the other options that would have asked a different question. And I would prefer it to be like a opportunity to ask questions instead. Like cutting me off from answering different questions by like forcefully jamming them into the thumbs up, like funny mask and aggressive like armor options sometimes just doesn't make sense tonally. And I don't like there's it continues to disappoint me. I'm not even frustrated by it. I'm just disappointed in it that the sort of limitations that they've restricted themselves to, or that they're wanting to branch off dialogue in this way is not ideal in certain points. But it's fine. Overall, I think that's like, there are some scenes that are written that I think are just like really bad. One thing that I thought was like weirdly modern is some of how Tosh's stuff is like done with like some of the codex and letters and stuff. It feels extremely modern in a way that, like, one of the things I mentioned at the top of the show and last week as well was the way they treat same gender attraction in Thetis is understandable and very believable for like a quote unquote medieval or like feudal society type situation with like some of the dialogue and some of the like options that are there. And I just don't know if it's because non-binary is still just so new culturally to us, like to our current situation generation, where like the idea of non-binary being and non-binary conversations existing the way that they have, like is there like the way that they went to it and they really hammered home the way they kind of hammered home a very modern verbiage, I guess. And maybe it's because there is not strong, more archaic English for non-binary existence. Maybe that's the case.
Yeah, I feel like that's like a lot of the masking of the complaints I've seen from the culture war pieces of shit who are like, I don't like it because it's bad writing. It's not that they don't like or they think it's good or bad writing. It's that they don't like that they're using specifically the term non-binary instead of like come up with some fantasy term for it or some shit like that. It's like, no, we're using the term because that's the term that should be used so that you get it through your thick skull that these are okay people to exist in this world. And,
okay.
But that's like, so I like that, like it is there at it, but it like, yeah, if this was like, oh, we're set in the Game of Thrones world, maybe they use some sort of other term for it instead of calling people non-binary. So actually, Game of Thrones would probably be the most direct in that because
I think so, yeah.
They try and be, but it's oh, if this were Lord of the Rings characters wouldn't use the term non-binary. It's like, shut
but what
the fuck
term
up.
would they? And this is
like,
where it's wrecking my brain is because I don't think there's another term to use.
And that's they want it to be a fantasy term so that there's a level of distance to it and they can kind of write it off for that.
So fuck those guys then for sure. But
yeah.
For me, for my situation, it's like the writing feels too modern to other stuff, but at the same time, I don't think there's an older version of that you could attach it to. And
that's why I think that's like,
I'm like that's
language
now my
language has got to exist at some place, and they're not going to come back. Like they already make up enough bullshit names in fantasy things.
Absolutely.
Well, why don't you just say this instead of that? The fact that like, oh, they don't. I mean, like in that same way, like why would you need to say? Why would you need a fantasy name for non-binary when you don't need a fantasy name for male or female?
Well, for me, it's not a matter of like I need a fantasy term for it. For me, it's like I just like when you're looking at it and it's being put and like lined up. It's not the fantasy stuff that I'm talking about. It's kind of the way that the writing is done and the way that people are being described as. Mm-hmm. It fits within a certain context of. This is the kind of English that we use for fantasy stuff, that you keep it to flavor it that way. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think those things exist for concepts like non-binariness. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's fine. But that's the dissonance that I'm feeling on it. If there, and I, once again, going back, I don't think there is. And if there is, like, is it going to be well known enough that people would not think that it's would not think that it's just a general made up term for fantasy. And I just think if that's the case, that's fine. And I'm cool with that. No worries.
It strikes me as, and some of the arguments I think I've seen like in favor of keeping it non-binary is if you try and like put a fantasy term on it, it's the same kind of like medieval erasure of like, well, there weren't black people in medieval stuff. So we can't have them in our fantasy medieval thing. And it's like, no, that's just stupid. That's that's
historically incorrect.
Eurocentric propaganda over generations. Like, no.
Well, where were the black people? It's like, well, I hate to break it to you, but there's been several events in European history where purges were done of people. So
so it strikes me as that same kind of vibe of like,
for sure,
because those people have been like oppressed and kind of kept in the shadows for centuries, that there deliberately was not terminology for them, or if there was, it was always like derogatory or something like that.
I mean, before the puritanical movements began throughout Europe and spread throughout the rest of the world, like it was just like, oh, those two ladies or those two guys, they live together. That's where the whole historical quote, like quote, they were roommates or they were the best of friends. Like that sort of like historical like lens that was put on it. Like the modern.
They were apostles.
There you go. John the Beloved. You get stuff like that where it's like and this is where like my dissonance is the modern application of like the heteronormative versus homosexual lenses that we have today. They are modern post-puritanical movement. Like prior to that, people just didn't have a word for it. It was just, people were just doing stuff. They didn't have, like, the Greeks weren't gay. The Greeks were just doing stuff. The try to like, and that's why some of like the more modern, especially in fiction, trying to like put terms to it, it doesn't work. And I feel like that's where I'm at, is I'm like, I just don't know, because they talk about same-sex stuff in like same-sex attraction and stuff as like just not a thing that people are labeling or defining in Dragon Age previous games. For this to be a thing that they're labeling, defining, then this is where I'm like, I'm okay with it. I'm fine with it. I don't have any issues with it. But like that's where my like mental dissonance is getting from. But at the same time, that's a me thing. The fact that we're getting representation for non-binary characters is awesome. The fact that we're like Zevran, even though he wasn't one of your favorite characters, he was an out bisexual character in Dragon Age that really threw some folks for a loop and was awesome to have. The fact that you had characters who were straight, characters who were bi, characters who were gay in these games has been awesome. Dorian, you can't romance Dorian as a woman. You just can't. In Inquisition, you can't. Because Dorian's gay. And that's awesome. It's awesome that we have those kind of definitions. And so having a definitive character who is non-binary, but is also a romance choice for both male or female characters, rooks that you have, is also very awesome.
And also non-binary rooks.
And also that's true, non-binary rooks. There are non-binary rooks. Thank you for correcting me on that. 1 second.
Yep. Yeah, the
Okay, now I'm actually curious. If you're a non-binary rook, what kind of dialogue options you have for Tosh? That's fucking cool.
I would be very curious as a non-binary Kunari rook what that looks like.
Oh, mind blown.
Yeah.
Mind blown. See, this is why Tosh being non-binary is fucking cool.
This is why you're never going to give me my copy back, because you're going to go through all of these different playthroughs to see all these different.
Do you remember when I said I have to buy my own copy at some point, because like this is gonna happen?
Yeah.
This is the kind of like stuff that's what makes Tosh being non-binary so cool about like in the lore of everything. I know we've talked a lot about Tosh. I was not expected to talk about Tosh this much.
Yeah.
But that is one of the coolest parts about this game.
That's also a part.
So my
you had not gotten to Tosh and
last
Emmerich time around, so we couldn't talk about that really at length.
So yeah, Tosh for like So my very small critique is like tonally, some of like the stuff about meeting with other non-binary people felt a little off to me. But hey, who cares? Still, some of that was still better writing than some of the other scenes that we've had. That's just, and also say the reason I have problems with some of these scenes is it feels very snippy in the dialogue, not in tone, but in verse. The way the verbiage is being used is very much like throwing out a one-liner, throwing out a phrase, like, "Oh, I'm also in the scene, so I'm going to say something," and it's like that wasn't necessary.
So one of the things I pulled up what you were chatting about is I pulled up like what the actual symbols are kind of like defined as by the game, rather than like, because I think like we see the mask and we think that equals sarcasm, and technically that equals display a playful and humorous personality, which a lot of the responses might be sarcastic because that's
the tone,
the playful, but it is that like they are in this game at least. Well, they're the same iconography of past games. I'm not going to look at like what the masks meant in one game versus this game, but in this game at least, and I think it's most commonly seen with like the fists that you think is like a antagonistic option or something. Oh, like
the
that.
Fist is like,
but it's like display a cynical and spiteful personality, or the brutish like arms crossed is display a tough and nonchalant personality.
Interesting.
And so I think like it's with that context that colors what that response might actually think
Okay.
versus like, oh, I thought arms crossed meant I'm going to say something with the intention of starting a fight. It's like, no, you're not.
no,
it's not the intent of starting a fight. It's just you're showing that you are,
I thought that was the aggressive, like brunt, like like very much like the brunt, very much like fact of the matter, which it does fit within it. The stoic, very tough choice is what my rook does a lot. I think thumbs up is like, is that supposed to be like agreeable?
Display an honest personality.
Honest personality. Okay. I have almost never do the shouting one. What is that one?
The shouting one with like the exclamation points.
Yeah.
Display a cautious and nervous personality.
Oh yeah, never chose that. So
yeah. So I think it's less shouting and more like there's a lot going on right now. I don't know how to think about this.
Well, there's some options.
So it's because it's exclamations in the head rather than out the mouth.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So okay. Yeah, I never choose that one. I rarely ever choose the fist. I mostly go for...
And then there's the eyes with the tears displaying a sentimental and melancholic
chosen that one a couple of times.
I like, and I'm curious how often you might choose this, like the faction-specific dialogue. It's usually, you have to go into
there,
like the more options.
I go for it every time.
Yeah.
If there's a more options, I'm always checking it out.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a Shadow Dragon option, I'm always choosing it. It's because that dialogue, my rook says some really cool stuff when that happens.
Sure.
It's like at one point it's like, well, it's like we're hunting down dragons. Like, well, you already got a dragon on your side. Like, let's see what this Shadow Dragon can do. Like some cool stuff like that. What? Yeah. Yeah. 100%. That's the vibe that it gives. Yep. What?
CSI.
CSI Miami. CSI Miami specifically.
I think I crossed the CSIs
them, yeah,
there,
it's
it's the David Caruso's does the sunglasses.
And that one does go
whatever that song goes. Yeah, versus OG
a CSI, which is
that was the Who or whatever. Yeah.
Gosh, that is a meme that has not lived in a very long time.
It's a meme that I certainly don't see as much these days.
It was all over the place. Like that was the meme for a long time.
Yeah.
The transition from static to GIF memes, that was like the prevailing one for many years.
Nowadays I tend the sunglasses meme I tend to see is like Ryan from Barbie, Ryan
Gosling,
him putting sunglasses on or taking sunglasses off over other sunglasses or something like that.
That, or it's like sunglasses on Stanley Cup, like I don't care, I'm done.
Sure.
Or what's her name from Amy Poehler at the Academy Awards, sweatsuit, up, sunglasses.
Yeah.
Like doing that, like very anyway, yeah.
Anyway, there's our meme about like, oh, you're a shadow dragon. Well, you've already got a dragon on your side.
Yeah. Bam. It's so good. I also want to talk about some of the factions that I've encountered now.
Sure.
Last time I was like barely touching the Grey Wardens. Now I've done a big...
Yeah, because we were basically right before you went and did the Warden stuff last time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I did all the Warden stuff, and it was awesome.
So yeah, I want to talk specifically because I remember we had a conversation about this at some point in terms of like, you were very... confused may not be the right word, but you were very like... what's going on there with the fact that this Grey Warden had a griffin in like the pre-release promotional stuff.
So as somebody who's read the
playing
books,
through that, I was like, yes, I'm playing through the game and learning about all the griffin stuff and all the griffin history with like the lens of knowing you and wondering what you're going to think about all this.
So
in it,
there's a book.
And you're also not through that storyline, so you haven't gotten to the full brunt of.
However, I now have a theory about who the Howler is.
Okay.
So being a big Dragon Age fan all the way up through up to Inquisition, I was reading all the side material, comic books and stuff. There's a book called Dragon Age: The Calling. And it is about I believe it's the third or fourth Blight. And it is about essentially it's the Blight where the Griffins die off. And
the
it's
fourth Blight. As I learned in this game.
Yeah, it's the fourth Blight. Not Arithmiel, it's something Roz. Like it's the archdemon that I can't actually say what I was going to say because that's a spoiler of a pretty big event. But like I know what happened to the Griffins because of that book. there's a particular character in that book that is directly like the reason why the Griffins die off is explained very thoroughly in that book. But if you played Origins, you know that there was an attempt to essentially like blight-proof Griffins. That's a deep dialogue thing that you get into with Alistair. There was something done to try, like the Griffins got blighted and then died off. If you read The Calling, you find out what exactly happened. And so I'm going to get into that because that's some spoiler stuff if you haven't read that book. That is a very big spoiler because this is also tied into the character who is the reason why there are now Griffins again. When we talk about the spoiler cast, in the spoiler cast that we'll do probably next week, very much like there's a lot going in there that I'm seeing a lot of I'm excited. But this is also the one where like the elven hero, I think Gladhel or something like that he was not a warden commander. He was just a Griffin rider, and him and his Griffin took down the archdemon, the fourth archdemon. He is a heroic character in the lore to elven kids everywhere. If you're an elf warden, particularly a city elf warden, you can have like a dialogue with Alistair where you bring up that warden and say, as we were kids, we pretended to be that warden all the time. Him and Crooky Tail is the name of his Griffin. Awesome character. That book is, by the way, very, very good. Just like extremely good. I highly recommend anybody who's into Dragon Age to read that one. It is one of the better ones. Just awesome stuff. Getting into like the warden lore about the Blight and learning much more about the Blight. When I said they went into the Bible on the game Bible, the lore Bible on this, and really dug stuff out and said we're going to get deep on this, it is about the Blight. It's about the Blight, the Elven gods, the kind of like historical implication of like how did things happen, how did things were ordered, who are the Titans, like what the entire look of Thetis was before, because we get the reveal in Trespasser DLC for Dragon Age Inquisition. Solus is the one who made the veil. We learned that. And he did it to imprison the elven gods.
Well, that reminds me, have you done and we don't need to dive too deep into this until we do a more spoiler casty thing, but have you gotten all of like the memories?
Yes, I got all the memories.
Okay.
Very cool.
Yep.
Love the memories. Love exploring the crossroads and like all the stuff. I've completed the crossroads completely.
I'm curious if you got it basically in the same way I did, where I had gotten all of those things and was just waiting on like when the quest would let me use them in whatever. And so basically was like, all right, now I can just put them all down back to back and just watch.
That's what I did.
Scenes, right. Yep.
That's what I did. It was an awesome experience. It was super cool. Mm-hmm. And then
that was definitely another moment I was like, Cameron's going to flip the fuck out when he sees this.
I did. It was so good. Dude, the reveal they do about the history of the elven gods and the history of the Fade and the history of elves and history of dwarves and the Titans and everything, how everything in kind of like quote unquote primordial Thetis worked, and the reveals that we got on that are insane levels of lore. Mm-hmm. Like big answers. Also, how Andraste's like impact and vision, how that all happened and how we kind of like that all played out makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense how a human, a very like primitive version of a humans back then viewed that within like as a Tevinter slave and everything, what was going on with the Tevinter gods, their connections with the elven gods. Cause there's always been the strong connection between the Tevinter archdemon gods, the dragon gods of Tevinter, and like how the Tevinter Magisters unleashed the Blight, which we knew from history. They tried to get into the Golden City. The Golden City turned black. Then we find out from Corypheus in Inquisition that the city was already black. And we get like that's answered here as well. Like what's going on with all of that? We have the lens at which humans and modern elves look at ancient elves and the ancient world, and the lens in which they see it through, and then to have somebody who has been sitting there by your side and throughout all of Inquisition who knew all of the truth and was just like watching you. Morgan even has a comment in this game where she's like, yeah, I work with Solus. I told him everything I thought I knew about elven history.
Yeah. What a dick he was.
Yep. What an absolute dick.
Yeah.
To just be like, you're wrong. You're wrong. Also like a very detailed explanation of what happened with Mythal. Also the revelation of like, what was the falling out between the other elven gods and Mythal? That gets answered. And it's very legit. The kind of like the answering of like, okay, well, what is the golden orb that Solus gets from Flemeth in Inquisition? All of that, that also, that getting to hear, also shout out to Flemeth's voice actress through all the games, getting to have like one more piece of dialogue in this game, in the memory, that happening is so awesome. Cause I forgot how she basically just like outright told him, you're gonna fuck up. Cause you can't fathom being wrong. And I'm like, speak truth, girl, speak truth, queen. Like I knew in Dragon Age Origins, you are legit. I knew, like, I hated to fight you as a dragon, by the way, in Origins, but Morgan is bae, and I had to get the book. Awesome stuff. Just awesome stuff. Awesome lore being revealed. Still getting through it. And awesome characters. I'm loving this cast. I'm loving everybody who's a part of the team. Nev, who was like, I don't know how I really feel. Love Nev. Nev is like my partner in crime. When we're roaming Docktown, we're going through it. Getting some of the Shadow Dragon options for some of the dialogue for her quest line is sick. Because it's just like outright like, well, we're Shadow Dragons, so we're going to protect, like, this is our city.
Yeah.
This is our city. Like, you sit down, I sat down with the Threads for dinner, and there was a serious moment of like, them being like, yeah, Docktown is ours, and it's like, yeah, Docktown is ours. Like, this is my city too. Like, we're all here, and it's like, it's like a super cool, like, coming of the different, like, sides of Docktown, like, shaking hands, and being like, let's kick this Venatori ass. Like, awesome stuff going on. It's so good.
You mentioned real quick that you'd done everything in the Crossroads. So in a non-spoilery sense, the fight behind the like 3 lock door, how did that fight go for you?
The first time, tough, because I didn't have the right party for it. I just kind of had some, like, thrown together some folks. Okay. Second time out there, I was there for a while.
Did you have any otherworldly assistance for that fight?
Nope.
Okay.
I just ran my party through. We just did it.
All right.
And then the other one, which is the one where you have to wait for all the memories to unlock and work with Morrigan. That one, I found out there's a fight attached to that. I didn't have the fight.
Okay. So did you do the one before that then?
Yeah, I did the...
okay. So if you do that, I'll go into more specifics, but if you do it in the reverse order and you avoid that fight like you did and like I did, that helps with the other fight.
Oh, I did not have any help with that one. No,
yeah.
I did it all. We win.
There you go. You went in. You just brute forced it.
Brute forced it. That was a tough fight though. That was a tough fight.
That was one I mentioned last week when we were talking about it. I did one that was like 20 levels too high and, got through by the grit of my teeth. 10 levels later, I did that one, which was another, like, that's a level 50 fight or whatever. And I was like level 30 and I was like, nope, didn't get him, more than a quarter way through. I'm going to come back much later and do this again.
I was 40 I was under 40.
Ultimately, I ended up coming back and doing it around level 40.
I think it was level 35 because I got the double. I was already at the point where I had double dagger throws for my mage. There's a thing where if you do a specific combo of light and heavy attacks, you build up the arcane bomb. You throw your dagger out, and then that's something that you get like level 20 with a specialization. You get a second one later on, and I think it's after 35. So I was 35 by the time I did that fight. And I took that on. I brute forced it. Yeah. It was tough because I didn't have my party that I had. Neither of them were equipped out with like throwing potions at me. So I had a belt that when and an ability that I cast, basically I get quickening, which is like slowly refills your health. If I do certain things. And so I was doing that while also, and then when it hits it and shades you, so you're by your lonesome and you're like, dancing through all of that, like I have not had any problems with dragon fights after that fight, because that's the fight that I've just been like, that fight taught me everything I needed to know about fighting dragon type creatures.
Yeah, that's very much the like, oh, this is the super optional boss of this
of this game, really. And I did it,
and
but the reward you get is insane.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's so good. I have a bunch of also purple items now, epic items that are I don't use a lot of them. But the one you get from the Morgan, the one that the fight that I didn't end up having to get.
Are you saying purple items or like the red items?
Sorry, red
like
items.
The unique items.
The unique items. Yeah. I got the unique item from the one where you, if you are a mage, you get this dagger, and it's super cool, very unique, and definitely like the coolest looking dagger in the game.
Nice.
I'm running that all the time. It's so cool. It's like I'm running into battle, my rook takes out this dagger. And it's like, let's rumble. It's so cool. It's so cool, man. This game is so good. There's like, I have some problems with it for sure, as far as certain aspects about it go, but these are all my issues with it are all minor issues. There's a lot of minor issues, but they're all minor issues. And nothing about this is game breaking for me. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest, the lore is carrying me through this game big time.
Yeah. I imagine then, obviously still too early to tell, but is it likely that this is going to shake up your top 10 game of the year stuff here?
For sure.
Year end? Yeah.
For sure. I think so. I don't know if it'll break up my top 3, but we'll see. Sure. Still have to get to the end of the game, you know?
Yep.
And there's a lot more game to go, a lot more quests to do. I had the critiques I now have, heavier ones, are I don't like the faction shop and like upgrading level stuff for that one. I don't care for how few levels there are. There's only 4 levels ranks you can have with each faction as far as their shops go. Mm-hmm. And you are at level 1 for such a long time. Yeah. Or level 2, 1 to 2 to even 3. The last one that you have to get to, it felt like, and it's not tied to the strength of the faction. It's not direct correlation to the strength of the faction. The strength of the faction is a matter of the unlocking of it. You have to have the faction at a certain level of strength before you can unlock the next level.
Yeah, for gear.
For gear, in their shop. Yeah. But the strength of it does not, I would have preferred it just be like the strength of the faction is you level up the faction strength enough, you unlock the next level of the shop, rather than doing an upgrade and using more and more materials and gold and stuff to unlock the next level of the shop.
I mean, that was not I never was lacking for materials to do the upgrades. It was always, okay, I finally have the rank high enough that I can now unlock level 4 or something.
Well, yeah, another thing too is also strength level, the fact that I have gone around to all these merchants to buy their useless items that are just done to, not even for the purpose of, you're always taking a loss on these.
Yeah.
And it's done, I think, as a gold sink. I don't think it's a very good use of gold. Another thing also I have a problem with this game is gold economy.
Sure.
Like I said, these are minor things. These things are not game breaking or deciding it at all, but I'm getting a lot of these minor issues that are minor critiques and problems that I have with the game that are just stacking up, that this is probably not going to be a 9 or a 10 for me.
Sure.
But I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. For me, the only issue I had with the faction stuff was that I think the game doesn't do a great job of telling you how backloaded a lot of the stuff, because a lot of it comes down to the end of the faction quest of those that you're going to get at where you're at now, basically. That's when you're going to get a whole ton of points towards that. And so it can be very easy earlier on, not knowing that, to be I need that many points. Well, I guess I'll just sell everything at this shop to get the reputation points here, not and then ultimately you're now I don't have stuff to sell at the other shops to build up their reputation stuff too.
That's the thing I'm running into as well.
Ultimately, end of the day, you can get enough points by doing just all of the side quests and all the faction stuff, but then it is okay, yeah, you're not going to get some of that stuff until the very end of the game. And I think it could have been doled out, a little bit more evenly across the game. I think but also I was never like, I was never perusing the shops for like, oh, I'm going to upgrade this gear. Or
I
like
haven't,
any of that kind of stuff.
That's
like,
my thing.
I guess the closest I would get maybe is like, oh, I'm at a shop and I see that, oh, so and so has that item equipped. Okay, I'll buy that to increase the level for that person. I was never going in there because I was taking whatever had the highest numbers for me. I was playing this game very much like I played Destiny and those
Everything
kinds of
else,
games
yeah.
of like, okay, the new gear that I got is going to give me a plus 10 or and a -4. That's a wash. I'm going to stick with what I've got now. I wasn't really paying too much attention to the ability bonuses or whatever the other things that were doing.
And I have
or there would be times where I was like, oh, I'm going to be locked into this item and I'm just going to ride or die with that or something like that. So I just wasn't using the shops for that. The shops and the faction stuff was more because I know that they're going to, Mass Effect 3 this or whatnot of like, hey, the more points you have in these things, the better ending chances.
That's what I've also figured out.
Get.
Yeah. I figured that out as well. For me, I've been going through them and I'm like, there's certain equipment that I like for my characters and I'm looking for that equipment and the next level to it. A couple of things about that as well. And I'll just put this out there. For sure for me is, your hand good?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm resting it on my.
Oh, okay.
On my.
Oh, so for people who don't know, Trevor's hand started poking
my hand
out.
Was just sitting out here on the side, like seemingly hovering.
And I was wondering, are you trying to get my attention or something? So I was like weirded out. I never see your hands.
Yeah.
For me, this thing that a couple of critiques I have about it is also like, if you're going to be doing this sort of, like, I see this a lot in mobile games and stuff like this, where like, oh, you're upgrading this next piece of armor or you're upgrading this thing, you buy it at how you upgrade it. The thing I like about it is I like that upgradable system. I do like the upgradable system a lot. My problem is that there's no visual like thing about the outfit or anything that's getting like better as you're upgrading it. And that's where I run into it, where I'm like, this is where if you're having me do this and you're going to limit my armor choices in the game, but you're upgrading it, give me some visual flair to that.
You like the God of War model of like,
yes,
we've upgraded it and now it's got a flashier hilt or something like that. Yeah.
Make it worthwhile.
Whereas I did not care.
Otherwise, I'm doing the thing where I got the N7 day like trench coat outfit, and then I'm running a Shadow Dragon battle robes. So my battle robes has like a cape on it and stuff, and like the boots don't come up very high. And so if I'm going into like say like the wetlands, I'm not wearing that outfit out in the wetlands. That makes no sense. It's gonna get gross. Swap over to the Mass Effect one, turn on my transmog for that one, and then I'm running that.
Sure.
Listen, man, I'm fashion souls in it. I'm doing this. This is how I play these games. I'm all about that. You give me a transmog system that early, I'm using it to like immerse myself into the world a little bit. Okay? Like this is how I get that next level like immersion. Like I'm out here in the wetlands or I'm out here in like the forest.
You're such a weird mix of Lorehound and that.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, no, Diablo makes perfect sense for like why you would have liked the previous games, and then just this one didn't click for you. They went all in for the transmog, benefits for you, but you did not like the lore of Diablo 4.
Yep.
So.
Well, even the transmogs looked like crap and they were expensive and dumb.
Oh yeah, I mean that's my thing in Diablo and in most games is like the gear is rarely like, oh, I must wear this. I want my character to look like this. And even in this, there were very few items where I was like, oh, I really like how that looks. So much of it was like, it's generic medieval fantasy stuff. But then, like we talked about last week, like when I got my Antivan Crow, like, exotic outfit or whatever that was like feathers on the shoulders and like just a super deep V. I was like, hell yeah, gonna rock the shit out of that look.
Listen, man, the looks in this game, some of them are immaculate. The battle robes as a mage are for the Shadow Dragons is like just so cool. You get like a book on the side, you get scrolls on you, like you look like a agent of a secret organization.
So much of the rest of it felt like the ponchos in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, this is a purely cosmetic thing that I don't give a crap about.
Yep. Battle robes. So that's another thing too. I like that they brought back, or they have across the board. You can wear heavy, light, medium armor, whatever you like. But I like that I unlocked the bonuses in.
Yeah, but like my stat bonuses were all like medium armor focused. So like I would keep a medium armor set was like the focal for my loadout basically.
But this is what was cool is that I went Spellblade, and so like, well, you're going Spellblade. So one of the options is one of the abilities that you pick up is medium armor armor specialization.
Yeah.
And so I now get extra bonuses to wear medium armor.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I would do too.
Yeah, that's what I did for that. So I'm excited. Like, if I pick a rogue, is there in the rogue tree? Is there an option to be like a heavy armor rogue?
Yeah,
cool. See, this is the stuff I freaking love. This is the stuff from like Dragon Age Origins that they had that they lost in Dragon Age 2, and they really didn't give you very much in Dragon Age 3 or in Dragon Age Inquisition, unless you chose like a specialization that would unlock that for you. Spellblade, for example, in Inquisition as a mage, you could then unlock like heavy armor for that.
Yeah, that's another thing. I guess just in general, I like the skill tree of this game that is kind of like, okay, here's your very central, like your kind of core skills.
The sphere grid aspect of it from FF10.
You've got like the middle ring that's basically like broken out into like 6 chunks, and like you can see like here's what this one's really good for. This one's really good for control. This one's really good for melee or whatever.
Sustain and whatnot.
Like whatever the different like branches are. And then you've got like out on the outskirts your 3 specializations if you want to like mix and match across those, or in my case I just stuck with duelist for my rogue, but like I would, once I got like all of the duelist things, I still had plenty of skill points left.
That's happened for me as well.
I was like looking through some of those other areas to see like, okay, what, like, again, I was playing on like easy difficulty, so I wasn't really too like needing to be too in the weeds on the combat and like what's really going to min max the particular aspects that I do. But it was like, oh, here's a passive that looks like that'll probably help me. Let me go ahead and like invest the points to get to that passive or something like that. And so I like that, like it kind of just looks like this little web out into what I like mine was very like a web out into the northwest quadrant of my thing, but there'd be like 1 or 2 stray things out, in some of the other directions too.
I have dominated the southern half of my skill trees. I unlocked it. I went for it. I'm like, well, I'm doing a lot of like lightning spells are kind of my preferred ones. There's the strikes based spells. I'm doing strike based spells, not really the other ones, not blasts or anything. So that's where I'm focused on. That's the extra abilities I'm getting for. And then it went into, well, there's 2 different kinds of strike. There's fire strikes and lightning strikes. What kind of like strikes do you want to do? And I was like, oh, I'm specializing in lightning because I like the chain lightning, and then I like the lightning dagger that you get as well. And then I unlocked certain perks that are like, hey, when you cast lightning, when something hits with lightning, it also gets fire. And so now I've divvied up my like abilities quite a bit, where it's anytime I'm throwing out lightning a lot and thunder or lightning spell and fire spells between my 2 different types of weapons that I have. And I'm just loading them up with burning, loading them up with electrified, and then also arcane bombing them and just doing hella amounts of damage. Yeah. I just unlocked getting like an extra 20% damage or like extra 5% damage per stack of like different afflictions you give them. And different primers, which Arcane Bomb is a primer. And so I have them on 3 different kinds, and they each get... Actually, Arcane Bomb, I now can stack up to 6 for 2 different bombs, which is legit. It's so good. I'm just destroying foes left and right.
Nice.
I'm doing crazy amounts of damage. And so then if I ever get in trouble, I just have Davrin do a taunt, and then I'm in the clear. Mm-hmm. It's great. I love it. It is like, this is making me feel like, oh, this is where it's establishing like Rook is that guy or that girl or that them. They are 100%. And so like when the cutscenes happen where your Rook does something kind of out of left field, it works and it fits so well. It's like, this is why Rook was like scouted by Varric. It's why Varric is like, you're in charge, because I can see that you have, the way you look at the battlefield is different than other people. You're always looking for your next advantage. Some of the dialogue choices I've had are like, well, what, like, we're in a tough situation. What do we do? And it's like, improvise. And it's like, what do you mean improvise? I improvise everything. Like, I'm like very much like, I'm here to improvise. Like, that's what I do. In one of the fights, you're like, things have gone off the rails towards the end of that fight. Like, things are not good and things are looking like they're going to go badly. My Rook immediately sees it's like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Ballista moves over, shoots the ballista, changes the spectrum of how that fight is going. And then it causes a really cool cutscene to happen with some stuff that's really, really awesome. I love that. I love that this is a character. They're like, this is not you're not a nobody coming up. Like, you're not the hero for Elden. You're not Hawk coming out of nowhere and becoming a player in a city. You're not the Inquisitor who wrong place, wrong time ends up being the savior of the world. It's very much of, you are scouted for your potential and now you are evolving and leveling yourself up through that potential. And you are the person that's needed for this story. Also, if you're like, where are the other heroes? There's a lot going on in the world of Thetis right now. Yep. There's a lot going on that makes sense.
Yeah, you've now had some conversations with the Inquisitor.
Yeah, I met the Inquisitor, and he's like, this is what's happening. And he's been sending me letters like, this is what's happening in Southern Thetis. And I'm like,
oh, she's bad.
Weird that I have the lighter job.
Yeah.
Weird that, I'm dealing with 2 elven gods and blights and blighted dragons and all this stuff. And somehow that's the easier gig. The Inquisitor and everyone else going on in Southern Thetis are doing the real hard work. Like, that's insane. I also say, if you've ever been like, man, I feel like Dragon Age 2 not really changed on the face of Thetis. Like, you're not really making an impact. And like, even in Inquisition, it felt like sometimes like, am I really making a big impact in the world overall? And here it is like, yes, every like big stuff lore-wise is happening for the world. Like, this will be, who knows what they're going to call this phase. It's like, because it's not like, it's a blight, but it's bigger than a blight. It's different than a blight. What are we in? Like, this is like, and it was like, the apocalypse was basically the way that Inquisition was. It's like, you're stopping the apocalypse from happening. This is something completely different, but it's massive and it's big and it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to my Inquisitor being like, because I said like, no, Inquisitor disbanded the Inquisition officially. That for me has been very cool, of like the Inquisitor being like, this is why, like, well, and my character's like, didn't you disband the Inquisition? He goes, yeah, I disbanded it officially. Unofficially, I've been just roaming around trying to pull strings, getting people on the right side of things, resolving difficult situations. That's what you're gonna have to do up here, man. And it's like, well, shoot. And Morgan's just straight up like, we are out of time. You got to get back because things are gonna fall apart without you. Also, like, interesting lore, just tons of interesting lore stuff. I'm loving it so much.
Yeah, cool. Any final thoughts, or do we want to hold off until we come back for a spoiler cast once you're done?
I think we're holding back for a spoiler cast. I'm really excited to do a spoiler cast.
We've talked over an hour about the game again, so I'm sure there's still plenty to go on when we can take the gloves off. So.
No idea. Like, this game is just like, it's very good.
Cool. All right, then I will segue us over into my time with Horizon stuff. Lego Horizon Adventures came out this weekend.
Where do you... Oh, go ahead. Go off, King. You're good.
Lego Horizon Adventures, a game that I've had certainly on my radar since it started kind of getting leaked and stuff, of like, oh, that'll be a fun thing as a fan of Horizon and as obviously the Lego fan. Cool. Seeing more and more about it and being like, oh, this is very much a kids game. Cool. It's not a Lego game by TT Games. It is a very different approach to a Lego game, but I was still like, okay, we'll see how it plays out. Seeing our friends Roger and Joey give it, I think gave it a 5 out of 10 on the Kind of Funny scale this last week. It's like, oh, well, that's not great. And both of them had played it with like co-op all the way through. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be playing co-op, so I won't have the gripes that they had with the co-opness of it. Won't really be a factor for me. But in the lead up to that, I was like, well, they just did the remaster for $10. I can, drop the $10 and get like the PS5 remastered version. And it's been a little while since I played through Zero Dawn. So after I finished Veilguard, that's what I kind of jumped into next. And it was very fun jumping back into that game, knowing now everything we know from Forbidden West, and no, like it was the thing going into Forbidden West. I was like, I don't remember. Like I remember big picture things, and as characters came up in Forbidden West, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember you, and I kind of remember your deal from the previous game, but like the game also very specifically heads to a different part of the map, so you don't have a lot of crossover between the two. But it was fun going back and like playing through Zero Dawn with the context of like who's going to matter in the future of this story. And so like one of the first things that jumped out was like I forgot how long it is until Silence comes into the story.
Oh,
in the
yeah.
original. And like you get Varl stuff early, and then you get Aaron stuff kind of when you get to Meridian. And they're, you know, those are going to be your three big characters that kind of cross over into Forbidden West. So I had, you know, a little bit more fun appreciation for those characters. But the thing that really stood out to me was how good the world building is in Horizon Zero Dawn. Both the modern world that Aloy lives in, as well as like, you know, when you uncover things from the old world and the things that get uncovered of the old world and the pacing of that. There's like the first half of the game is so non-old world. It's like, yeah, that's the looming, like, what's the mystery of Aloy's birth and like what's going on with this. And, you know, I still remember like when you kind of come across the first old world ruins in early on in the game, the marketing had very specifically kind of like played close to the vest, and it was never like, yeah, this is an outright future of our world kind of thing. So when you start uncovering things and realize you're in, you know, Denver, Colorado kind of thing, and you start making your way west, I just remember thinking that was so cool and such a fun approach to a post-apocalyptic kind of thing. And then like digging into what goes on and the, you know, Ted Faro of it all and the Pharaoh plague, and then like Pharaoh hijacking and disrupting the Gaia project to kill the Apollo. And so basically like I don't want the future to know that this was all my fault. So
hate him so much.
I'm
hate
going
him so
to
much.
fuck it up for everybody.
Shout out to them like predicting Elon Musk being a shitbag like way early on.
Sure, yeah.
Back in the day when we were also praising him.
Yeah.
Shout out to them nailing that.
Yeah. So yeah, just like I love all that. Love like revisiting, replaying all that. And combat still phenomenal and great stuff. I had so much fun and I had a great time. So yeah, I basically just burned through that over the course of the week and change, and got the platinum in that again, which was a good time, and had a much more smooth time through the Frozen Wilds this time, because when I originally played, I played the base game when it came out, platinumed it, and then the Frozen Wilds came out like 6-7 months later. Hopped back into that, really out of shape, really rusty on the combat and stuff, and was getting my ass kicked by frost claws and fire claws and stuff like that. Had a much smoother time of it this time around. But yeah, had fun just jumping back into that and appreciating just the great world building that Guerrilla Games did with that first game, and seeing the seeds that they plant that are going to pay off in like reading a thing basically saying like, oh no, the Far Zenith expedition, you know, the ship exploded or so, like, and knowing
the truth
in the future that like that was, you know, a deception to, you know, get them in the clear kind of thing. But like just seeing some of those things that I know are going to pay off in, you know, in dividends in the second game, and the interesting like elements that they set up for the second game were a lot of fun to kind of see that on a replay. Lego Horizon Adventures, on the other hand, is a very it's a very interesting game in terms of like, yeah, it's kind of doing the story of the first game, but not really. I was thinking about it in terms of, do you remember like, I imagine you had the same kind of thing when you were growing up, but like when I was growing up, there were like these little collections of books that were like, American class, or not American, but like literature classics that were like
American classic literature.
Like it's 100 pages, but it's like A Tale of Two Cities. Or,
yes,
or
I remember those exactly.
These
Seriously deeply abridged versions of the stories
for like fifth graders or below or something like that.
My brother had a whole set of them, and I read them voraciously.
Yeah.
So when I went to high school, being like, "Well, I've read Tale of Two Cities," and then it's like, "No, you didn't."
Yeah. Lego Horizon Adventures is not that. Lego Horizon Adventures is like the 6-year-old, picture book version of those for Horizon Zero Dawn. It is a this is very much a geared towards, child's first Horizon game kind of thing.
Gotcha. Okay, so this was not what you were expecting with the game.
It's not that I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting it to do more of the thing that like good Pixar, good DreamWorks stuff do well. Sure. Of like we're gonna tell the adult story, but for kids, but the adults will still have something to enjoy in here. This is very much this is geared towards the kids. There's like a weird little meta humor to it that it's much more in the vein of the Lego movies style of comedy compared to the other Lego games, where there's like meta. I mean, like Rost is your narrator, and spoilers for Horizon Zero Dawn, but when Rost dies in the story, he's still your narrator for the game. And so in the Lego parlance, he's basically like he throws a joke out there of like, and that's how I became the narrator. And continues to be your narrator for the rest of the game, and was your narrator like up till that point too. But it's like Erend, who has some like very emotional, troubled stuff in the base game, especially like his sister is basically like, captured and then killed, and he kind of has to step up, but he was always the fuck up little brother. He's got a serious like problem with alcohol, kind of like, and like uses that as his crutch to kind of like avoid his problems or drown himself in his problems. Like,
it's a serious story.
None of that is in this. In this, he is the guy who likes donuts. And and it's like, okay, like he's the lovable oaf who likes donuts. He's much more of a Homer Simpson's character than the depth that you get with Erend through his side quests and stuff.
I figured that's a very adult story. Erend stuff is very adult.
Exactly. Like Varl's like, characteristic is, he read comic books from the old world and he wants to be a hero, or he wants to be a superhero, but he's afraid he's never going to be one. He's always falling around and bumbling. And it's like, okay, that doesn't really have anything to do with him in either of the Horizon games, but
definitely not, because his whole thing is he as a child, like he always felt guilty about how the village treated Aloy. And
him not so much. There are other characters. He's much more like, again, having just replayed it.
Please tell me. Yeah,
he's much more. So Sona, his mom, is the war chief, and he's kind of like, she won't let him on the dangerous missions, even though he wants to do his part to serve the tribe. He's certainly not. He's
fighting against the Nepo system.
Yeah, he's not like antagonistic towards Aloy at all.
Not at all.
Certainly,
no.
But he like, there are other people in the village who were much more like, I never liked how they treated you, kind of thing. Or
it was his sister. His sister was one of the people who.
His sister is one of the people in the Proving, who's very much like, hey, it's like,
you're one of us.
You're one of us. If you can, do this Proving, then they can't, turn you away. She dies in the Proving. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's also
struggling with, and that is like, it's almost a Saving Private Ryan kind of feeling that he's going through.
I forgot about that, but that's like, very true. I remember I was like, I thought it was Varl, but no, it's a sister who's like,
it's more
really
like
reaches out.
So like Teb the tailor. Teb is made the tailor in this game, and he's the tailor in Horizon Zero Dawn 2. But like, he's the kid that young Aloy saves from the Robo Dinos, and he is eager to welcome Aloy into the Proving and all that stuff. So I would say he's the one most like welcoming to them.
Yeah.
And like gives, her gear, gives you your first like armor to upgrade into in the game.
Teb's legit.
In Lego Adventures, Teb is the guy that opens up the tailor shop, and now you can switch all your Lego characters, and you can switch into a hot dog outfit if you want to be a hot dog outfit, or it has a weird little mishmash of like Lego branding customization stuff.
Yeah,
because obviously they're not going to get like Marvel and DC to sign on to have their stuff in there, so it's the Lego brands of like, okay, you can. At some point, you unlock city stuff, and you can start customizing your Mother's Heart area, with a police building or a jail or a recycling car or truck or something like that, or you can throw on a businessman suit kind of thing. And then at some point you like unlock Ninjago stuff, so you can go with that aesthetic if you want. Or
that fits.
Amusement park is the weird oddball one. Like,
That's pretty weird.
Ninjago is like the most aesthetic in line with this, because you can be like, okay, well now my Mother's Heart looks more like Meridian or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like amusement parks, like, okay, well yeah, now I have just a dunk tank that somebody sits in, and you can go like interact with it and splash them, or just weird things like that. So like there's a weird little like customization of the Mother's Heart home base, which is basically your hub world that you're unlocking as you go. It's very much, because it's not a TT Games Lego game, they do away with most of those kind of conventions. You still collect studs, but like they're at a very significantly reduced rate, and you're using those studs to unlock outfits or unlock decorations for the village and the customization stuff, or unlock upgrades. There is like a upgrades system that you can utilize and basically like buy tiers of an upgrade with the coins. You're getting gold bricks for finishing missions. You're getting red bricks for finishing like Apex missions, where it's like, okay, you're gonna now go fight like the Apex version of the Sawtooth that you just fought or something like that. But unlike the TT Games Lego games, red bricks don't do anything. They don't have fun little like modifiers that you can plug in or anything like that. And gold bricks are just to like gatepost what unlockables you reach at certain points. They're like little side quest things of like, here's a community board. Okay, for this challenge, you need to go kill 20 enemies dressed as this character. Okay. You have 4 characters that you can play as in single player or multiplayer or like co-op. So Aloy, Varl, Erend, and Tirsa, which was an interesting choice, because that's the mother superior of kind of the Mother's Heart area. So like, and she has a lot of granny jokes, and that's her characteristic. Aloy's characteristic is that she, grew up without knowing who her mother is, so she's desperate to know who her mother is, and as soon as you get the game also just wildly plays with the lore and the history, and so it's like, yeah, Elizabeth Sobek's in there. Hades is, in there. Silence is a DJ. Like, he comes in, that's his vibe that he brings to the table. Okay, sure. Yeah, it's just weird. So yeah, like I said, this is the like picture book version of it. Like, if Horizon Zero Dawn is like A Tale of Two Cities, this is the like 10-page picture book version of that. Okay. Is what this game is. Combat's fine. You get your, like, each of your characters has whatever their primary weapon is. Aloy, of course, using the bow. And then you can unlock kind of like different ammo types that'll be like limited. Like, oh, you can unlock, up to 20 fire arrows. And you might find more fire arrows littered around after defeating enemies or stuff like that. And then you also have gadgets. And the gadgets are more like oh, here's a gadget where it's a tripcaster. And like you set down one end, run around the map, set down the other end, and anybody who, walks through that is going to take a lot of shock damage and be affected by that. Like, one of them is like blast boots, and it's basically just a double jump, but on the second jump, you shoot fire out of your boots. So if you like double jump on a grazer and like get the blaze on their back, you've exploded that grazer, they're probably going to die.
Nice.
So it does like fire damage to there. So like little interesting mix. The gadgets are kind of like any party or anybody can use the gadgets, and then like the ammo, each of your characters has a different ammo type.
Okay.
So Aloy is going to have different arrow types. Varl uses like a spear that can, you can get a fire spear, or you can get like a boomerang spear where you throw it out, it does a little bit of damage and kind of circles out at its apex and then kind of like makes its way back, doing damage all the way. Aaron, of course, has his hammer. And then Tirsa, they just give bombs. She just throws bombs, and like usually they're like her special ammo can be like rubber duck bombs or shark bombs, and they just play into the absurdity of it being Lego stuff. From a like design and look aesthetic, everything in the game is like can be built by Lego and stuff like that, which wasn't always the case in a lot of the TT game stuff. Like a lot of times it'd be like, okay, the landscape is non-Lego, but then there's a lot of Lego stuff on it.
Yeah.
This is all like, oh, everything here is built via Lego, but it also doesn't do the thing from TD games where like not everything is destructible. Like there's a lot of non-destructible stuff in this world where it's like, okay, I'm trying to think. I can't think of like, I mean, I guess it's another game that kind of does a little bit what Dragon Age does, what we talked about last week, and what like Destiny does in terms of like, this mission is this section of the larger map.
Yeah.
And we're going to go from like here to here, and then we're going to, fight the boss there, and then we're going to leave, and then we're going to get dropped back into the big, overall forest area map, but we're going to get dropped in a different place and kind of go through a different path. But it's all kind of loosely connected. So it's that kind of thing. Weirdly, like, you can't like replay levels or anything like that. Once you've done everything there is to do in an area, the game opens up like expedition mode, where it's basically like, okay, we'll drop you in somewhere, and then you kind of go through that area. You fight a mini boss or two, and then maybe you'll end with a mini boss. There's some kind of like little branching path areas where it's like, okay, do you want to go do a cauldron, or do you want to go do a tall neck, or do you want to go do just more, fighting things out in the world kind of stuff? But nothing overly creative in the world. But there's basically like 4 little biomes. There's you start in a forest area, then there's like a mountain area, then you go to the jungles, and then the desert are kind of the 4 different sections, and you kind of just reach them all from different spots on your village that are, opening up and expanding as you progress through the game. It is very much like the one thing that I'll say against like this being just a full flat out like, oh, this is a game for like people 8 and under or something like that, is there was one line that just jumped out to me in terms of like,
what?
Well, that's not a child's line of like, so like Helis, who's like the big bad like cult leader from the first game, is turned into kind of like bumbling oaf who's obsessed with he's obsessed with the sun, so we always see him sunbathing, and he's like lounging around, and then Hades is like yelling at him, and he's like, all right, you got it, boss, and he's very much like the underling to Hades, but yeah, he's kind of more bumbling oaf, and you're like so he has way more to say, in this game. But it's like at one point he says something along the lines of like falling on your ass, and specifically like seeing ass written out and hearing it, I was like, that's jarring for this otherwise very, very kiddie humor game. Like why didn't they just do falling on your butt? Like that seems like that
falling on your
been,
rear, like
falling on your butt. I think would have been
100%
the target for so much of what the humor
and everything
and level that this game is going for. So it's just a weird, like, that's a weird, like, out of left field. Like, I wonder if that elevates this from being an E for everyone to a T for teen game or some shit
just
like that.
A for the
just one random ass bomb. Yep.
So
just
weird.
Like, all right, and I
don't want to say an A bomb because that's way worse.
Completely unnecessary. Just a weird, like, all right. But yeah, it's also like, one line out of a 7-8 hour experience, something like that. So it's whatever. from what I understand, it's a way worse experience co-op wise because
Ooh,
the co-op,
that's not how these games are supposed to
the
be.
co-op tethering isn't great, and it doesn't do the thing that a lot of the games did great of like, okay, yeah, if you guys are going to different parts of the map,
Split screen.
we'll just split screen it and kind of like redesign the screen around that. Nope, you are confined to the same screen, and if you get too far apart from one another, one will just automatically get teleported to the other, potentially messing up whatever they were planning to do in that moment or whoever they were fighting. Seems to be a potentially very frustrating experience in that regard. Without dealing with that, the only like the biggest like frustration I really ran into was like it's just a very repetitive and isn't really bringing a lot new to the table. So it like ultimately I would give this probably something like a 6. Like it's an okay game. It's definitely like not as much as I'm the Lego guy, not geared towards me really. Like still cool to see like, oh yeah, I can throw a Ferris wheel on the top of, one of my custom houses or a little, amusement park roller coaster and kind of have that there. And there were a little bits like where, got a chuckle out of me or a smile, but so much of this game was very like, just like trying to figure out, is the target audience for this parents who like Horizon and want to introduce Horizon to their kids? I feel like that's got to be it.
That's got to be it.
That's
right?
got to be it. And like maybe this does very well on Switch, targeting that particular audience. But otherwise,
or is it like kid sees dad playing Horizon, dad or mom playing Horizon, wants to play Horizon.
This is certainly a very simplified. Like this has nowhere near the combat depth of the other.
Yeah.
You can press L1 to like trigger your focus, and like that will show like here's where the weak points are on an enemy, but like you're not really like the game will auto target whatever weak point is kind of like nearest to the arrow not retinue
retina.
Yeah, the arrow the basically the targeting beacon of like that you're okay, I'm gonna shoot here. I'm shooting at like 7 o'clock on the screen or whatever, and that's closest to the antenna on a stalker or something like that. So it's going to hit that if it does a weak point, and that does a little bit more damage than hitting somewhere else on their body or something like that. It's cool to see all of these creatures Legoified, because I'm certainly, as somebody who has the Lego Tallneck up above me, and they just recently revealed an upcoming Lego set that's going to be like a Shell Walker and a Sawtooth.
Cool.
With Aloy and Varl. I'm hopeful that means that they're going to be making more and more of these Lego sets, and so I can just kind of build out the more of my menagerie. If not, though, I'm sure within a few weeks, a lot of like Lego kind of mock sites will basically have like, okay, based on how they built them in this game, here's instructions on what pieces you need if you want to build a Lego Stalker and what that's going to look like.
So as a person who's not a big fan of the Lego games,
you would not
want
to worry. You would not want to bother with this at all.
Cool. That's kind of what I've picked up from you. I was like, I'm like this. I already am like not the biggest Lego dude.
I would say like this is the kind of game that might be good for John's kids.
Sure.
Like as like an introduction to Horizon, and like they might have some fun with it.
Even though they don't know PlayStation to play the other Horizon games.
But I mean, they could play it on Switch, and they could, have fun watching these characters, talk about pickle sandwiches and donuts on their Switch.
I think that would be good for Robbie. Would probably get a kick out of it, and Jenny for sure would.
Yeah.
Addie is when you said like age wise, Addie is 10, 11. So she's out of that of that range.
Yeah,
already.
I would say probably. I mean, like I'm a 39-year-old, so I have a hard time gauging what I actually thought was funny 29 years ago versus 31 years ago. For real age ranging on this, like maybe Addie finds it fun. I don't know, but yeah, like ultimately, this is the point being like this is very much a geared for kids kind of game compared to adult fans of the Horizon series looking for, a different take on it. And so yeah, it's going from like, oh, I love all the world building and stuff in the remaster to like, oh my god, they've just completely abandoned the world building and are just pure surface level visual sight gags and stuff like that. Okay, yep, that's an approach. Yeah. So yeah, not a bad time, but it's like I was looking and like didn't reach too high on my game of the year when all is said and done. It's in the lower rung of the games from this year for me. Not bad, but certainly not what I would have preferred to have seen from this. I know something that like Roger and Joey both, Joey especially, as like Joey being like a fellow Lego Dimensions, nut. Like I think there was a lot of sentiment, and Roger talking specifically with like the Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga game that he grew up with. Like TT Games had a formula for a Lego game, what works and what doesn't work, and they could have at least pulled what works and put it into this game. And the fact that they don't, and the fact that this is like there's an element of like, this is a Guerrilla Games game, so like they signed off on this. It should be better than it is ultimately where I fall on it. And yeah, I think from a Lego game standpoint, they know what can be really good about Lego games. And so it's weird to see them like allow so many things that are kind of references to other Lego games, like the gold bricks, like the red bricks, but then to not have any of the like replayability-ness of them, or it's very much like, this is a very on rails linear. You're going through like
interesting. Okay,
like each of the 4 zones is set up like, okay, there's things you're going to be doing and things you're going to find in each of those levels. But it's like, oh, it's not a Super Mario 64. I can go into a world and do it any which way I want to approach. It's no, you're doing the story that we're telling you. And then there's no like go back and replay that level. It's very much just, okay, you did that level, now move on to the next level, now move on to the next level, move on to the next level, which is also just a very bizarre approach given Horizon's wildly open world design.
Yep, that sounds weird. That sounds like doesn't
just a weird mashup of like I think much more interesting in idea than execution on this one for me. But yeah, not a bad time. The worst thing about it for me ultimately ended up being like, okay, if I really wanted to go for the platinum, which I did, and I went and got it, is the like there are a couple of trophies that are very grindy of like, okay, level up, like there's one trophy, level up, you level up a character to level 20, and that's the highest level you can get in the game. If you use one character for the entire game, you're gonna maybe get to level 18. So then you have to go through and do like the replayable expeditions kind of stuff where it's just going through and doing combat stuff over and over again. And then there's a trophy to get all of your, characters up to level 20. So that just means extra grinding. And it was a good it was a good 4 or 5 hours of just extra grinding and like replaying while I was listening to podcasts and catching up on stuff last night and today to get it. And so I was like, all right, not leaving a great taste in my mouth just to get that trophy. Fortunately, there's a minor way of cheesing it of like, hey, you don't need to have an actual co-op partner, but if you have a second controller, you can turn it on, have that co-op partner, and then use the fact that the other character is going to rubber band to you as you move through the world, but at least they're getting experience points. And there is like accessibility options to basically say like, okay, you can turn invulnerability on. So you can just have like both you and this other character not going to take any damage, not going to get hurt, not going to die, anything like that, and just drag them through so that you're at least leveling up both characters at the same time, and you can kind of use that to make the grinding bit a little bit quicker, as opposed to, all right, like when I finished the game, Aloy was like level 18, a couple of characters were like level 11, somebody was level 12 or something like that. And so it's just like, okay, I'm going to get Aloy to level 20 pretty quickly, but then I've still got to get the other 3 characters up, for the end game a lot. So it was like, not great. Just lots of grinding, like repetitive. And again, because it's not incredibly engaging, gameplay. It's just kind of all right, I'm going to do this while I'm, watching the latest episode of Critical Role or something like that. So anyway, those are my Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered and Lego Horizons Adventures thoughts. Fun enough time, nice enough way, especially with the remaster, to go back and kill a week. Lego Horizons Adventures, simple enough way to kill a weekend, especially since we didn't end up doing D&D last night. So that was my time with it. Now I will forget about this game until, a Lego Horizon set comes out that I will get and enjoy, and then think, yeah, this is a better time than the time I actually spent playing that Lego Horizon game. Like, building a Lego set, I'm going to have more fun with than I did with this game, ultimately.
Yeah.
So, yeah, oh well. But that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to chat more Dragon Age thoughts and let me ramble about some Horizon stuff. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site. You follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. As we said previously, we've kind of moved things over to Blue Sky at this point. So go follow us over there. Cameron at revcabot.bsky.social or whatever it is. Anything you want to plug there, Cam?
Yeah, I want to kind of plug a primer. Like, hey, this is coming up. This week we are going to be doing Deadpool and Wolverine for that D Plus show. I have,
the plan was to do this last week, but you were out with the flu, so we basically had to cancel / postpone it to next week. So. Yep,
for health reasons. Yep. So that stunk, but
I appreciate you not coming over and giving me the flu. Sure.
Yep. I have something fun to tell you about, like how I got it, and it's not like a gross thing or anything like that. It's just a fun that is that interesting.
All right.
But yeah, overall, flu sucked. But this week we are going to be doing Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm very super excited about it. We're revisiting after seeing it together in theaters, so pretty stoked.
Yep. Yeah, I already sat down and watched it. I already had the doc all ready to go for our usual recording on Thursday, and then you were like, "Hey, not feeling great. Gotta sit this one out." And I was like, "Okay, do you want to, do we want to just delay it a couple days?" And you were like, "No, let's just push it to next week." Cool, all good. So yeah, no, we didn't have a That D Plus show this last week, but if you wanted to catch, we talked about before that, you can go still catch music by John Williams.
So good.
I'll make that my plug. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey over on the Blue Skies. Music by John Williams was a good one. Or if you wanted more of our Dragon Age thoughts, especially more of my thoughts having finished the game in last week's episode, you can also certainly go back and catch that. We'll have Deadpool and Wolverine will be this week's That D Plus show, and that'll be it for this month because we're going to take off the Thanksgiving week. So I've already started looking at like some of the potential options for Christmas, and I have noticed that because we now have Hulu as part of that subscription, it has certainly opened up a new avenue of potential Christmas options.
Very true.
So we'll see how all of that those options play out. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, and we did get a That Nerdy Site Blue Sky up and running too, so you can follow us there if you would like. And that's pretty much where we'll be posting the new episodes and stuff. But if you like what you heard, please remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.